In the past, we have talked about the software development lifecycle, and a couple of recent courses and reviewing some of that content has me thinking about that a little bit more as far as how does it really apply to software developers and particularly the better software developers. Is it something that is really just an academic kind of exercise, or is there more to it? Now, the software development lifecycle, I think, is a foundation for good developers, is a foundation of what they do. You may think of it as sort of just a simple checklist of, hey, we do these things. These are pieces of software development. And in a sense, they are. However, when you do those things better, your software will be better. Now, sometimes that's very obvious. For example, implementation. If you write good code, if you can create a good product, it's going to be a good product. It sort of follows. However, understanding the whole process and doing it better is important. And this is why we put together a class that is a very simple one. You can spend about an hour and understand it better, or you can go into a deep dive and understand it even better. And it was that question of why even bother? Because, hey, most people can, after a while, they can sort of figure out the SDLC. But there is more to it. There is value out of each of those steps. So gathering requirements. We go to gather requirements. There is an art, basically, to properly gathering requirements. There are templates and things like that we can use, but also the way we go about it. The process itself is critical in us gathering all of the requirements that we need to. And while you may say, okay, we can always catch up later. If we miss something, we'll find it somewhere further down the road. But one, that has a higher cost. It's easier, it's better, it is more efficient to get our requirements gathered up front. But more importantly, we want to be able to get the level of detail we need for those requirements so they can be properly designed and implemented and tested. So gathering requirements is not just like creating a list and, hey, we're off and running. It really is starting with that list and then digging into it and understanding it so that we can build a solution that is not just what we are asked for, but what actually solves the problems that our users or customer needs to have solved. Now, software design, sort of the same thing. You can throw something together fairly quickly and say, yep, here it is. Here's some features and things of that nature. But if you don't spend enough time, if you don't go into enough detail, there's going to be gaps. And then it's going to cost time and it's going to be frustrating to fill those gaps in. But also there's going to be a servicing of issues that maybe are not correct. The best way to describe this is building software that nobody ever uses. And it's not necessarily because you didn't solve the problem they want solved. It's because maybe it wasn't solved in the right way. Maybe it wasn't a very useful approach. Maybe it is more trouble than it's worth to use your approach to solving their problem. And so designing software has something to do with it. Requirements does as well. But when you design software properly, you are keeping those users in mind. You are going through some, basically some steps and some templates and sort of some approaches that help you better put yourself in the shoes of your user and therefore design a better solution. And it's also that technical side is you want to be able to design something that the implementers can implement, that they can code, that will help with a scalable, maintainable, high-performing solution when we get done. Now, of course, implementation is, I think everybody would look at it and say, particularly because it's so much a part of the SDLC as far as time and resources spent, everybody would say, hey, if we can get better at implementation, then we can get better at building software of high quality and scalable and all those good things. But there's also approaches to implementation that help ease that. They grease the skids for getting implementation done correctly. It has to do with things like communication and setting some sort of proper setting of expectations and planning and estimation and some things like that we can all spend some time in a general sense talking about implementation, learn a little bit more about how that fits in, and find some ways to be better developers by being better implementers. Now, testing is something that has not been historically maybe given the weight, the gravitas that it needs, but is now becoming more and more a part of development. The modern shops have, especially if you go to continuous integration and deployment, but even without, most shops now, most platforms have built in this expectation, at least, that you're going to be doing unit tests and you're going to have regression testing, and that you're probably going to have some level of system testing and validation, so that when you deploy your software, our goal now is, as it always was, but now we have tools to do so, which is to deploy something that works, that if it has bugs, we can more easily track those down, communicate those, get those fixed, retest it or validate the fix, and then move forward. So testing, and especially in the world of SDLC, even if you're not a tester per se, a QA resource, then it's still very helpful, even all the way back if your specialty is gathering requirements. It is very useful to understand what the testers are doing and how they do it, and some of their best practices and processes and procedures, because that's going to help you do a better job fleshing out those requirements. And of course, you think about design, a better design that is now communicated to the testers, so that the whole process is much smoother, flows better, and you essentially not only help yourself do your job better, you help them do their job better, which comes back to now everybody wins. Now, deployment is something that has definitely grown in complexity. And I think it's worth it for all of us, even if we're not a deployment expert of some sort, to understand what can go into it. Because particularly, again, going back to requirements and design and even implementation, there are things we can do that we'll say helps that along. And there's also things we can do that hinders our deployment efforts. We can over-architect things. We can make things more complex than they need to be. And then that's going to cause headaches down the road. And it may impact everybody along the way. The testing even, the testing now is starting to be sort of built into deployment in a lot of cases, or at least some facet of it, particularly like deploying into a staging environment or something, because you'll commit your code, and then there'll be some tests, some sort of a test brace that runs against it, and either says, yep, you passed, or you didn't, and either you move forward or you fix it. Doing those things and having, as far as like testing and things like that, and having deployment in mind, and vice versa, is really important. It is a critical step in being able to do those things better, to do them efficiently, and understand what are the moving parts that we have to be aware of when we are building some of these systems and testing them. And all the way back to designs and requirements. It's what is it that we need to do to bring all of these things together, so that when we get done, we can put it in front of a user, which deployment does, in a way that is useful to them and in a way that is easily reproducible and something we can validate. So even deployment, which sometimes is not terribly complex, it may just be copying a file from point A to point B, but still understanding that better and what can go into that, even if your software maybe doesn't take advantage of the complexities of modern deployment, where you can have things going out to different mobile applications, and you have database updates, and you can have API updates, and you can have all these integration updates, and just it can go on and on. Understanding that whether you have a simple or a complex deployment, is yet another way to better do software, to build software better. When we get into that last SDLC step of maintenance, thinking about this cycle idea of SDLC, the C in SDLC, software development life cycle, that cycle part and how we maintain our software, which is like security updates and simple things like that, and maybe minor bug fixes, but then also enhancements and how we cycle into essentially our next version, whether it's a point version or a major or minor release, things like that, depending on your terminology for how you build software. And particularly now when we get into this much tighter cycle approach to software development, it is not uncommon to have an MVP and then a month or two later you've cycled through and now you've got MVP +1 or whatever it is. You've got this next iteration of that MVP because you got it, you built it, you got your minimally viable product, you got it out to market. Now you want to start enhancing it and building on top of it. So understanding that we go through all of this and then we basically can start back over again at gathering requirements is, I think, critical, particularly for long-lived, healthy, growing software, because as we go through a cycle, we can have that next cycle in mind. It's on our radar, and therefore we can be doing things to help us in the next cycle. We can already be putting together some requirements. We can maybe make some design changes, things of that nature that will make, if not this software cycle better, it will make us better as we go. And of course, there's methodologies that sort of enforce this or help us do this. And those are some of the things that are often talked about in SDLC courses and introductions, and which we cover as well. We talk about some things out there, and we even go very deep into the very popular Scrum and talk about Agile and things of that nature. So software development lifecycle is, I think, very critical for it. Gives us a common language for anybody involved with software development. So even if you're not a developer, if you're requirements gathering like business analyst or something like that, if you do software design, if you do software implementation, if you're a tester, if you do deployment, if you are a product owner, if you are a business person that is thinking about building software or has some connection to software within your organization, whether it's building or whether it's buying it and customizing it, SDLC has a lot of value. It is something that gives us that common language that we can talk about all of these complex processes and actually communicate what it is that we want and what our goals are. Without it, then it falls into this thing that we've seen in the past where people just struggle to communicate what they want or communicate what they think is being asked for. And then you just spend too much time trying to clarify and get people on the same page. If you can get everybody understanding SDLC, it is a very good step in being able to properly communicate and be on the same page about your software and product. So thanks for your time. Thanks for listening in. As always, if you have any questions, shoot us an email at info@developreneur.com. Check us out at developreneur.com, school.developreneur.com if you want to learn more about SDLC and check out we've got a free course with a nice little quick reference. You can check us on Twitter at developreneur. We're out here just trying to find ways to build better developers, make better developers, and in whether we can do that directly with developers or in the interactions they have with entrepreneurs and business owners and specialists and subject matter experts and all that. However we can do it, we are happy to do so, because when the developers get better, when they do better software, it helps business become better. You become more efficient, and you do so at lower costs and with some confidence that you're going to hit your targets of time and budget. Thanks a lot for your time. Hope you go out there and have yourself a great day. Hello, this is Rob with Developreneur, also known as Building Better Developers. Wanted to announce that we have school.developreneur.com Feel free to check it out if you like any of this information, any of the content that we've sent, and you would like to see more. You can come out, you can enroll for free. We have free courses. We've got places for you to get better at just learning a technology, our how-tos. You can work on your business skills. We can help you with becoming a better developer, as in coding and things like that. A lot of the stuff you've seen on YouTube, we also have out at School.Developreneur. We just have it in a little more of a educational format and a way for you to track your progress as you move forward becoming a better developer.